Dr. Makary, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Good to be with you, Ariel.
It's good to have you here. The Trump administration has made a significant push to make GLP-1 agonist medications more available and accessible to a wide swath of Americans who really need them to treat chronic obesity. You're a physician, you're the head of the FDA. Explain to us why these medications are considered so groundbreaking.
Well, they're reducing downstream healthcare utilization. They're reducing the risks of other health complications that are expensive and take people's lives. So this medication for some individuals, and we don't recommend it as a first-line therapy, but for some individuals, it's a miracle. It's mimicking a hormone that's normally in the body. And clinical studies are pretty impressive. It's achieving goals that cannot otherwise and have not been achieved at the scale that we're seeing from other methods. So we want them to be affordable. Again, the first line therapy is behavioral changes, exercise, eat well. We're rewriting the food pyramid and the dietary guidelines to tell people the truth. But for people who need these medications, we want them to be accessible, and that means making them affordable. It doesn't make sense that they cost $1,300 in the United States for a month's supply, and you go to London and can find it for $88. This president believes this has been one of the great American ripoffs. And so we've asked drug companies to lower their prices to be equal to that of other wealthy countries. So that medication will be available for $149 for the initial months.
Change definitely feels like it's on the horizon. Dr. Oz has said that he expects that 135 billion pounds will be lost by the midterms. That's an astonishing number. Do you believe that's feasible?
Yeah, look, we're seeing significant reductions in weight, but what we want people to know is that your health is not just your figure, it's your physiology. So you can lose weight, including muscle mass, but you really need to be on a high protein diet and also exercise while you're in that regimen. Some people have a tough time getting over the first 3-month hump where you might have some digestive issues or some nausea. And so for some people, they can't tolerate these medications for a long time. But this is a conversation with your doctor, and many people are great candidates.
And you have said in the past that once you start a GLP-1 medication, oftentimes that's a lifelong treatment. What is your view on long-term use of GLP-1s for weight loss?
We'll see what the data shows now, but we have seen some really impressive 10-year data that is telling us that it is reducing risks of other health complications. The data are impressive, and so we've got to look at that data and listen to patients that are saying amazing things about their experience. At the same time, it is something that we need to constantly remind people of, that the best thing is to use it to transition to a change in lifestyle and what people eat.
As you mentioned, there is good evidence over 2 decades or so of these GLP-1 medications and their safety and efficacy in people who take them for diabetes, but we don't have that data yet long-term for those who are taking it for weight loss. Some say that they worry that the other shoe's going to drop on these medications, that we're going to find out things later on down the road once so many people are already on them. Do you believe, based on the data that's already available, based on your medical expertise, that we are going to see safety signals crop up with GLP-1s in the future?
Well, look, if you're morbidly obese and you've tried many things that have not worked, then there are no great options. Either you continue to deal with that obesity and all the health consequences that come with it, or you deal with the side effects and potential adverse events with a medication. Now, it is reassuring that the GLP-1 medication is mimicking a hormone that's normally in the body, so it's performing that function. It just needs to be managed and managed well as we encourage people to switch their lifestyle.
We know that the next generation of this medications is on the horizon. We have talked about the pill form of GLP-1s that the FDA is now looking at approving, I believe, in the next couple of months. There's also talk of a monthly injection or a biannual injection and a triple agonist. What's the landscape look like for these medications and weight loss in the next months and years?
So as you mentioned, there are more routes of administration that are becoming widely used, and the FDA is in the process of evaluating new products with new routes of administration. The oral forms are very popular. But there has been a concern about muscle wasting with GLP-1s. And it turns out one of the biggest predictors of longevity is muscle mass in somebody's body. So people need to be cognizant that we want to preserve muscle mass, and that reducing muscle mass may have some long-term unintended consequence. Now, right now, doctors generally believe that that consequence is less risky and less severe than continuing a path of morbid obesity in one's life. So we're talking about balancing risks and benefits.
Will the next gen medications address that concern about losing muscle mass? Will they be more equipped to make sure that that doesn't happen?
There has been some optimism about new products that are designed to spare the muscle wasting side effect of GLP-1s. As of yet, I haven't seen impressive data to support that on a large clinical level, but we're hopeful that we continue to see medications that work for people.
Is a post-obesity America feasible, and what would that look like for the FDA?
Look, we're already seeing a number of diseases like fatty liver come down because of GLP-1 medications. There's GLP-1 medication trials now to treat Alzheimer's or prevent Alzheimer's, and there may be some association between Alzheimer's, which is going up, and glucose metabolism. So if you look at all of the diseases in medicine, at least half of them have something to do with insulin resistance and glucose. It sort of makes cells dysfunctional at their membrane. The body doesn't like all of the sugar that's circulating, and it sort of turns off the ability for sugar to come in. We call it insulin resistance in medicine, and that's at the root of many conditions in medicine. So what we're seeing is that when we address some of that glucose metabolism issues with GLP-1s, we're seeing improvements in some of these conditions.
Yeah, and you segued perfectly. These drugs are showing promising signs and studies of reduction in Alzheimer's, improving renal function, reducing inflammation, helping to balance hormones. Do you see a scenario where the FDA starts to approve these medications for other modalities? What's next in the pipeline as far as the FDA is concerned in possibly approving GLP-1s for non-weight loss applications?
Look, we're open to it. We have a job, and that is to look at clinical trial data that is presented to us by companies and decide whether or not that justifies the claims that companies want to make around their products. That's our simple task, and if we see something that works and is safe, we're going to approve it. We have had a process that's taken too long at the FDA. Why does it take 10 years for a new drug to come to market on average? We've got to challenge some of these deeply held assumptions, look at the idle time and the red tape in the process. And so we have now a pilot program to get decisions out in weeks once the phase 3 clinical trials are done. And so that means that we can move quicker, and we can also use our convening power to get a decision out promptly. So who are we starting with? We're starting with companies that are developing medications in our national priority interests. That is, addressing a large unmet public health need like insulin resistance, domesticating manufacturing, a national security issue, developing a medication that reduces downstream healthcare utilization. If a medication eliminates the need for surgery and chemo and radiation, that's a medication we want to look at promptly. And finally, medications that are affordable, because affordability is part of the access and effectiveness of a medication. If you have a drug that is 90% effective, but only half the population can afford it, it's really only 45% effective. So we've got to make affordability a priority.
We're definitely going to come back to the National Priority Voucher Program that you've piloted because I want to talk to you about that. But just one more note on GLP-1s. When it comes to compounded and counterfeit GLP-1s, these are becoming so pervasive that you can walk into a med spa and any vendor can prescribe what they say is a GLP-1 agonist. A lot of times they're turning out to be either compounded or counterfeit. The FDA has warned people against taking fake products. Is the FDA planning to take stronger action against these unauthorized vendors?
Yes, we are. So we've made an announcement that if the API, or that is the active pharmaceutical ingredient, comes from a source that we're not comfortable with, has not been vetted, that we're not going to allow that. So people need to know they are taking risks if they're taking products that are not part of the mainstream, not the branded products, and those risks need to be known. So we do want people to know about that.
And I know you touched on this, but if the administration is as successful as it hopes to be in expanding access and affordability to these GLP-1 medications, will the supply of the brand-named, trusted, vetted medications keep up with the demand if there's that significant uptake?
The companies tell us that they are ready to keep up with the demand. they have anticipated a tremendous amount of demand. They're seeing the results. The trials are more and more affirming of the benefits of GLP-1, so the companies tell us that they can keep up with the demand.
Okay, so one of the things that's become so popular nowadays, I'm seeing it flood my own social media feed, is microdosing GLP-1s. Give us a sense, as a physician, as the head of the FDA, your position on microdosing this medication. It's clearly an off-label use.
That's right. I mean, we generally only talk about approved indications at the FDA, and anything outside of those approved indications are done with risks that need to be discussed with a physician. We're not here to condemn off-label use, and microdosing is an off-label use of the medication. But physicians have historically, even doctors in ancient times, would find ways to break down medications or give it in smaller portions so to test how somebody tolerates a medication. And the initial hump of that GLP-1 action on the body can be tough for people to get through. That's why we see a big drop-off of people compliant with their GLP-1s after 3 to 6 months. So microdosing is a strategy that some doctors have used. The FDA doesn't promote it, but it is something out there.
Can it be dangerous?
I think any medication ever taken has a potential for an adverse event. And so people need to recognize that. But generally speaking, you're taking a much lower and therefore safer dose of a medication that's already mimicking a hormone that exists in the body.
I want to pivot here just a little bit and talk about drug approvals and monitoring safety signals. You've been very critical of the FDA's current system that monitors adverse reactions to medications and vaccines. How can that system of reporting be improved?
We have big data now, so we can have eyes on a medication or vaccine or any product in real time and assess whether or not we're seeing a safety signal emerge, a drug-drug interaction that we were not aware of, or a subgroup of people that are differently affected by a medication. And we should be able to respond quickly. We shouldn't have OxyContin approved and then 15 years later realize that it may have killed people unintentionally at the scale that it has. It's a tragedy that 5 years after Vioxx was approved, maybe 35,000 Americans died from that medication. We should have eyes on a drug in real time, and we're doing that now by creating our big data amalgam, so we can have AI monitor signals in the data as we have humans take a cut of data and do interim analyses. And we can do that for all new FDA-approved drugs.
I want to talk about something that has made headlines in the last week or so. Your colleague, Vinay Prasad, suggested that 10 children had died from the COVID vaccination. That obviously could impact the COVID vaccine schedule that's recommended, but he didn't provide the evidence that a lot of experts are hoping to see, including factors like the children's ages, medical histories, timelines, documentation of their deaths. He didn't identify the manufacturers of the vaccines that these children may have taken. Is it premature in your mind to change vaccine policy, COVID vaccine policy, before there's more expansive data that's provided to experts?
So we've known about children who have died from the COVID vaccine for a while now. It's been reported in medical journals. In the New England Journal of Medicine, there was a young male reported as having died from the COVID vaccine directly after vaccine-induced myocarditis. There's been a Senate subcommittee report on deaths from the COVID vaccine. I know of physicians who have directly seen COVID vaccine deaths in adults. Vinay Prasad was very clear. These are rare complications, but the question is, since the FDA has had this information, do we make it available to the public? And does the public have a right to this information on COVID vaccine deaths in children that have been verified by career scientists at the FDA? I believe they do. So these were deaths, the data for which accrued in the prior administration. It was not released to the public. We chose to release it to the public, and we do it in a stepwise fashion where there's a top-line announcement, and then we release the details in sort of a scientific
But why not
include
those important factors that may give people more insight into the circumstances and the context under which these children lost their lives?
So we do that in a stepwise fashion in science. So we could either not say anything and keep it secret until we have the final report, or we could let people know the top line data and then make the details available, which we plan to do. And it's no surprise, it is consistent with what has already been reported in the literature.
You have been incredibly transparent. That's been part of your agenda. You are a physician who's published many peer-reviewed studies. Doctors we have spoken to have expressed concern that HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s agenda is, quote, unscientific. Your reputation, like I said, is for transparency, for digging into the data. Do you share his skepticism on vaccines?
Secretary Kennedy is asking questions that many Americans are asking. And in all of my interactions with him, he has asked questions or posed ideas, but said, ultimately, Marty, you're the physician and you do what you think is best in your judgment. And that's been the same experience of the physician team that leads the NIH and CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So I think it is okay for people to ask questions. We need answers that are based on evidence.
Is he being adequately deferential to the physicians and the domain experts in your mind?
I think he is.
The CDC's ACIP, the ACIP committee, is meeting today. I know you're aware of that. They're expected to address the hepatitis B vaccine for infants. A new review that was just published of 400 studies over 40 years found no evidence that delaying that universal Hep B vaccination in infants improve safety or effectiveness. In fact, quite the opposite, that delaying it had its own risks. So what do you believe is behind this discussion, this debate, and possibly this decision?
There's a debate really as to whether or not we're going to talk about nuance in science or have sort of an absolutism, all or nothing strategy. And where there is nuance in science, I do believe in nuance. And that is that if individuals are lost to follow-up and they delay the hepatitis B shot in a hepatitis B positive mother, there could be risk for that individual. If a parent, however, tests negative for hepatitis B, which is the vast majority of women who deliver babies in the United States today, if a woman like that asks whether or not it's okay to bring the child back later in childhood for the hepatitis B shot, which, let's be honest, is preventing a sexually transmitted and blood-borne infection, then the real answer is that the evidence has not compared in any trial fashion early versus late administration in childhood. We're preventing something that happens as early as in the teen years. And it's good to be honest with people. When we tell them that no, it must be on the day of birth, when the reality is if the child gets it at age 8, 10, or something in that range, there is just as much effectiveness in preventing that infection, then we lose credibility. And we need to rebuild public health trust, especially coming out of an era where parents were told their kids must stay out of school for nearly 2 years, and they must get a COVID booster every year for the rest of the child's lifetime. And the reality is the data didn't really support all of that.
And most physicians that we spoke to say that they've deferred to their patients if they want to prolong or extend the time period for that Hep B vaccination. But the concern can be for vulnerable infants in the hospital where those diseases can live on surfaces for quite a while. So how do you allay the concern that you might as well mitigate something before it even becomes a problem?
Kids do not contract hepatitis B from surfaces. We saw this during the HIV outbreak, how there was a fear that kids could get it from a water fountain or touching a doorknob. The reality is this is a sexually transmitted and blood-borne infection. We want to prevent it. Rates have come down significantly over the recent decades, and that's because of hepatitis B vaccination and best practices around awareness. I want to see kids protected from hepatitis B.
ACIP is looking to pull back those recommendations on the medication, on this protocol that's had that 40-year track record of safety and efficacy. In your mind, how does that square with your push to speed up drug approvals?
I don't see it as pulling back. I see it as providing a nuanced and balanced perspective where the evidence supports hepatitis B vaccination, that is in moms with hepatitis B positive tests or the test has not been done and it's unknown, versus a delayed recommendation. I think they're talking really about the nuance. Ultimately, the government is not your doctor, and we think physicians who know this literature can and will continue to make good recommendations.
But you're going to set the guidelines and the recommendations, and doctors generally defer to the government recommendations, correct?
We'll see what they decide.
We talked for just a moment about this, but we'll get back to it because I know this is a big push of yours. Your National Priority Voucher Pilot Program will, in your mind, shorten the span of approvals from years to weeks in some circumstances. But one of your own top drug regulators resigned allegedly over this program. Can American people trust that if you start to approve these drugs at rapid, even record speed, that they will remain safe?
Well, first of all, I think it's false reporting that he resigned over this. He's actually still working at the FDA and still in leadership. He's in his 70s and he's planned a retirement, and that retirement is coming. So there's been some false reporting around that information. He's done a great job, and he helped us in the transition in that center of leadership.
You brought him on board, correct?
He was actually at the center for over 25 years. He was at the agency for a while. And so he helped us during this transition. He's not a new hire from the outside. But I think what you're getting at is, can the public know that if we reduce the time in reviewing an application, that they can feel that the drug is safe? And the answer is yes, because we have to make sure that we don't cut any corners in safety. And we reserve the right in this new pilot program to extend the time as long as we need if we have any safety concerns or questions. But there's a tremendous amount of idle time in the review process, time when the application or parts of it sit on a desk or sit on a shelf and nobody is looking at it. Now, obviously they're in the computer system, so I'm making a reference figuratively. But why do we wait for a clinical trial to finish before we start examining the manufacturing, sterility, and quality aspects of the development of the drug? We can do that during the clinical trial when we're waiting for the results, and once the results are read out, we can then review those results and have already some of the pre-work done.
So you want to be operational in manufacturing the second that a committee reviews it and says it's safe?
I think we can learn lessons from Operation Warp Speed. If we had the cure for breast cancer or type 1 diabetes that I think we could potentially see in this administration, then do we really think we should just give it another 5 years to go through the process? Or can we learn from data points like patients describing a complete reduction in their tumor to the point where it's melted away entirely? There's no need for chemo, surgery, or radiation, and a resection of the tumor bed shows no active cancer cells. Those are the sort of things where we can put that product into an accelerated pathway and apply a national priority review voucher, as we did for one of those products, to get a decision out quickly, because waiting years has its own risks for people who could benefit from life-saving therapies.
Tell me more. You made a tease there. Tell me a little bit more about diabetes. You genuinely believe that we might see a therapy or a cure for type 1 diabetes?
I've taken care of a lot of patients with diabetes. I've been involved in islet surgery transplantation work, and that work was really with the hopes of finding a cure for diabetes. And while I'm no longer practicing surgery, there appears to be some potentially promising ideas whereby when we see the news releases, when we see the abstracts pre-presented at a conference in the program materials, we proactively reach out to the companies and ask them, send us all your data, we want to talk to you about it. Don't worry about the application right now, let's just have a conversation. And I go around to scientific reviewers at the agency and I ask them, are you seeing anything that looks amazing? Anything that gives you chills up your spines because of what it could mean for kids with a disability or patients with Alzheimer's or some incurable condition? And most of the time they tell me no, but sometimes they say, there's this amazing potential therapy and in animal studies it looks promising. Those are the products where we want to go proactively, reach out to the drug developers and give them a priority review voucher.
Explain what a priority review voucher means when you say that these are prioritizing drugs that support national interests.
Yeah, so domesticating manufacturing is a national security issue. If you're going to make an antibiotic like Augmentin in the United States, as one company proposed to do, we're going to give you a national priority voucher, and that's a real recipient. If you are addressing an unmet public health need, have a highly innovative therapy that's a game changer in the field, or working hard to make medications more affordable, which is an access issue, then we want to promote those because we're doing a pilot on this national priority review where we convene people to get decisions out quickly. So when you do a pilot, you have to pick some products to put through the pilot program. So do you pick them randomly or do you pick them based on drugs that align with our national priorities? We've chosen the latter.
You've announced that you'll accelerate approvals for biosimilars. many Americans may not even know what those are, but for those that are actually taking them, this is vital, which the FDA says account for 5% of prescriptions, but 51% of expenditure on drugs. What will this mean for patients?
Well, President Trump has said affordability is a massive priority in this administration, and the fastest growing area of healthcare spending is drug spending. And the fastest area of growth in drug spending is a class of medications called biologics. It's over half of drug spending now. These are molecules that are made from a cell line. They tend to be very expensive, but there are generic forms called biosimilars. And those generic forms have been blocked in a long regulatory process. So we announced we're cutting the red tape for biosimilars, reducing the time to bring them to market in half, and reducing the cost of research and development by about $100 million. In a $200 to $300 million development cost, that's almost cutting it in half. We want to see more biosimilars. They radically lower the price of drugs. We're also delivering on a promise to make more medications over the counter, because something's magical about the price when it's on the shelf in a pharmacy. You see competition, you see people shopping. 90% of medications are less than $30 a month. And so we want to see more medications over the counter so we have more price transparency and lower prices.
I want to talk about overall confidence in public health right now and trust. A new poll found that confidence is dropping in the FDA. It dipped from 60% in December of last year to 52% in October. What can you, as the head of the FDA, do to restore trust in your agency?
Well, first of all, trust in doctors and hospitals in the healthcare system took a 31-point drop over the 4 years preceding, that is, during the COVID era. A lot of people don't trust us. And so we've got to show humility. And that means we stick to the gold standard science methods of evaluating interventions and products, and at the same time be honest with people when the right answer is, we don't know. And I think people are hungry for honesty in the healthcare system and in the public, and that's what we're going to try to deliver.
Dr. Makary, thank you so much for taking time. Many more questions to cover. Hopefully you'll join us again.
Let's do it again.
Okay.
Thanks.